This is Andy Mello from Mello Fab here. Going to do a bearing video, best or the easiest way, I guess, for removal. I've got two knuckles here. This is the one that come off the machine. When I took the knuckle off of the machine, the bearings are in such bad shape the rollers actually fell out. It had wallered around, and you can see it ground the collar in between the bearings till basically there was nothing, and it wallered the knuckle out. Bad shape. So I had to acquire another one, and currently there wasn't a new one available anywhere in the US, so I reached out to the company and found a good used one. Nothing wrong with the bearings in there, actually in good shape, but I am going to remove these bearings and install new. But one thing I wanted to cover at the first part of this video is your pins that go in these knuckles here. These are the ones that come out of the used knuckle. You can see muddy, nasty looking grease. The cups are, the seals are chewed up, not in great shape. And you can see down the nastiness inside the knuckle. All of that needs to be cleaned out thoroughly. You have a void in the center of this knuckle where all of your grease goes, in between the two bushing pieces in the end that are machined into the knuckle. Get all that really nice and clean, and then you can fill all that with clean grease and then put your bushings back in. I'm going to choose to use the bushings out of the old knuckle because they're in really good shape. Cleaned them up. All that's just stain that's on there. There's no grooves. Check for grooves wore out in the collar, because that will create play in the knuckle as well. That actually looks like wheel bearing play at times. And these seals here on the old knuckle cleaned up really good. I'm going to reuse those. But those are some things to start with. Once you get the knuckle removed from the machine, I'm going to get everything set up here in a little bit and show you once you have the knuckle off in your shop or whatever, how the best or the easiest way to remove these seals and bearings. Okay, I'm going to cover the easiest or best tools to use. If you have a vise at your house, you don't have to have a vise. It just makes it a lot easier. As you can see, you've got this collar in between, so this bottom bearing will have to be driven down. Then you'll have to flip the knuckle over and drive this one out this way. But to start, you want to remove your seals. If you try to drive these bearings out with the seals in, it's not going to make you very happy. It makes it a whole lot harder. I've actually removed the seal on the outside to make the process a little faster, but I choose an easy tool that most people have in their shop is a pry bar. Not everybody's got a seal removal tool. You just get the pry bar in there real good. Make sure you got it clamped really nice, and it pries right out. Real easy to do. A seal remover really isn't any easier than that, and a lot of people don't have that tool. So my preferred tool to get these bearings out, which makes it really easy, is an air hammer. Old trusty air hammer. Chisel bit. You're going to put the air hammer down in there. You're going to angle it right below the collar, and you're going to start hitting on it with your air hammer. Once you get it moving, you can work your way around, and then you can get under the collar, and it drives out really easy. Same for the flip side. If you do not have an air hammer, I understand everybody does not. A nice punch or chisel works really well also. It's hard to catch that ledge, but once you get it started and get it moving a little, it'll start driving down. And if you have a punch holder, that makes it way better, so you don't take a risk of hitting your fingers. But in this position, I'm going to drive this bearing out. I'm going to get these bearings out, and I'll show y'all what everything looks like with the bearings. Okay, once you get your bearings drove out, it's very important. This knuckle I've cleaned it all up now. I chose to use a nice handy dandy tool that I have here. You don't have to use that. You can use sandpaper, emery cloth. But they build up rust right in this area pretty bad. and that's where you're going to be driving your bearing or pressing it down to. And you don't want any buildup on this ledge, so your bearing seats real nice. Clean up in here really well too. This had some surface rust, because if you don't, it's just going to make it a lot harder on you putting the bearing in, whether you drive it in, press it in. And one trick that I like to do, I keep a dummy bearing. This is an old bearing that was pressed out, ground down as a driver. Just drops right in the knuckle. So when I go to drive my new bearing in, which I'm getting ready to take the seals off and double check them, make sure they got plenty of grease in them. When you go to drive this bearing in, if you do not have a shop press, you can get it centered. That way this bearing will be hitting on the bottom bearing where it's supposed to. You can either hit directly here with your hammer, or get you a block of wood, or preferably a piece of steel that will take the hit and transfer it into the bearing, and then drive the bearing down or press it in, whatever your method is, until it bottoms out here. Keep in mind, everyone, when you do any of these techniques, make sure you use safety glasses. Bearing races, they are known to fracture. They can shatter when you're driving on them, trying to drive them out. I have personally seen somebody have to go to the hospital due to that. So it's not a good thing to not have your safety glasses on when you're doing that. But when you drive the first bearing in, you'll flip the knuckle over, and here is the collar that a lot of people talk about. This goes in between the bearings. As you can see, it fits right in this hole. It's not a press fit or anything. You'll drive the one bearing in, flip it over, drop the collar in, and then you'll drive the second bearing or press it in. We'll resume the video after those steps. Okay, here's the knuckle. I did take the new bearings apart, and surprisingly, they had an ample amount of grease. That is fairly rare, but I'm going to take my dummy bearing, lay it on top of here. I'm not going to use a press, just to show you how to do it, I guess the hard way, because not everybody's got a press. I've got just a chunk of 3/8 plate steel. I'm going to lay this on top of the bearing so I can get a good center hit and drive the bearing down into the knuckle. You'll feel the bearing moving as it's going and you're hitting on it. And then when it gets to that ledge, it'll be a solid hit with your hammer if you're going through that method, and the hammer will bounce back at you. You'll know you're seated. At that point, you can take it over, flip it over, and inspect it. So I'm going to go ahead and drive this bearing in, and I'll show you what it looks like and how the collar lays down in there. Okay, I have the inner bearing drove in, seated nice and solid, drove in really nice. So you'll flip your knuckle over, and you'll see there's a gap there where it steps down. That's where you will lay this collar in, and when you drive in your second bearing, it'll push against this collar and be up against the inner bearing. And then at that point, if it's a little misaligned, you can get a punch in there and line it up so your axle goes through appropriately. So I'll drive this bearing in and show you the seal technique. Okay, as you can see, collar's in there. Got both bearings drove in and seated. Now for the seal installation. The perfect scenario, which not everybody can achieve, but I've got this driver I made years ago that works on a lot of different seals. It lays on there perfect. You want to try to find something that'll go over the seal and hit on this part, so it'll drive it down in there flush and won't deform the seal. I know not everybody has a socket that big. If you don't have anything, a big piece of PVC, or you can even, if you've got a small hammer, you can very carefully work your way around the edges, get it started, and start driving it down there. There's a lot of different techniques, but the optimum scenario is if you've got some kind of a seal driver or pipe that'll lay over it just like that. So we'll get the seals drove in there and we'll finish the knuckle installation. Well, hope this video helped someone out. If you got some bad wheel bearings on your Yamaha Viking or Gen 1 Wolverine and want to tackle it yourself but you're not sure, have some questions, it can be a little bit intimidating, but with some patience and some tools, don't even have to be that special. You can do it yourself at your house, in your garage, save a little money, and have a little fun while you're doing it. Everyone like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.